All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to another episode of the Remarkable Coach podcast. As always, I'm your host, Micheal Pacheco, and today with me, I have Kirby Ingles. Kirby helps leaders create real, sustained change in their lives. He's a leadership coach, a combat veteran, and he hosts the True Success podcast. His 26-year leadership and human capital experience have allowed him to provide results-driven, laser-focused, purpose-to-impact coaching to high-potential professionals since 2014. Kirby, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you making the time to be here. So we heard your bio, your intro. That's a lot of that stuff sounds amazing, and I want to circle back to it. But I like to open this podcast every time by simply inviting our guests to tell us a little bit about yourself in your own words and why you do what you do and how you got into coaching.
Yeah, to describe myself and a little bit about why I got into coaching, and is I'm a very driven person. I've been like that since I was probably got out of high school. And a lot of that has to do with growing up without a father, and so I was always in competition with other people, having to prove myself because of the father wound, and many of those things out there that are like that. And a lot of those young kids that grow up like that are driven, and I feel like they have something to prove. And while I had gotten through adolescence and got into the Army, when I was about 17 years old, a junior in high school, I knew that was the route that I was going to go because I had some great grandparents that kind of drove me in that direction. I had never thought it would be what it was and what it ended up becoming. And it was just a really great experience for me. Taught me a lot of discipline. I got a lot of great mentors out of the process. I also saw, some not so great leaders and some really great leaders. And so I saw the good with the bad. And I got to have a multitude of experiences in a lot of different positions, not only just human resources, which is my profession, but I worked as an inspector general, an instructor. I worked with victims of sexual harassment and sexual assault. So, one of the guys that I, is still a mentor of mine today and I look up to, said, go get a breadth of experience, just go try a bunch of stuff out in the Army, have fun, enjoy it. And it's a great opportunity. And I did that. And that's why I kind of landed in the coaching arena, because somebody had come and spoke to our organization, and it made me really start thinking about at mid-career, because eventually at some point, like he said, 4 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, your service is going to be no longer needed. You have done what you've needed to do. And either you're going to age out or you're going to choose to leave on your own terms. And he's like, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And so that's where I started thinking about coaching, and how does that fit, into what I want to do. I didn't really know it was going to be coaching. I thought I was going to be a counselor. I just wanted to help people. Because in HR, that's what you do. You help people. I know HR gets a bad rap sometimes of that person that, has that difficult conversation with employees. You get reported, and HR sets you up for anger management classes, or
HR just makes obnoxious policies.
yeah. You make obnoxious policies, but usually that's company driven, not HR. But HR is always the one that gets punched in the face, and and I was like, I love customer service. I love helping people, find solutions to their problems. And it wasn't always bad stuff. It was sometimes getting rewards, getting, benefits and different things like that. And so I just really enjoyed that aspect of the job. And I was trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do? I know I don't want to be in HR anymore after I leave the military. And so what am I going to do with this? And so the helping people on a one-on-one basis was the thing that I loved. And I thought it was counseling. So I began, going to Liberty University and, to get my master's in human services counseling. And then there's this opportunity to go into coaching. And I was like, I'm curious about what this coaching track is. And then as soon as I took it, I took the next coaching track, and then the next one after that, and the next one after that. And but lo and behold, I was ready to start a business because this is what I wanted to do. I was like, no, I don't want to do counseling. And a lot of that had to do with different positions too, why I decided on that. I worked as a senior advisor for a while. Personal and professional development, is one of the things that senior leaders help young soldiers with, mid-careerists and other leaders. And, that's what coaching does. It's personal and professional development. It's about the whole person. And we were already doing that in the military. So I was just taking a lot of the skills that I had and beginning to apply it in the coaching industry. things I didn't even know that I was capable of doing until I began to explore the coaching world. So, and then there's a lot of resilience training that I had, working with
Sure.
positive psychology and stuff like that in the military, teaching master resilience to soldiers. So a lot of that really kind of brought me to where I'm at today, which is the coaching and training industry.
Nice. What was it specifically about coaching as opposed to like being a counselor? What was it specifically about coaching that resonated with you so deeply as you were taking these coaching track courses at school?
Yeah, I began to think about that too, because I was in that, I got that basic understanding of counseling, that foundational learning they make you all take. And
Hmm.
as I began to explore that, I was looking at human trafficking and a lot of other areas that I'm concerned with, like fatherless kids, growing up into adolescence, the all the societal ills that it impacts, suicide, domestic violence, drinking, alcohol. And I'm looking at all these things, and I'm like, that's exhausting. And I was just like, man, I really don't know if I want to deal with everybody else's negative issues, and that's kind of how I looked at it at the time. I don't really look at it that way anymore. But I was just like, that's a lot, man. You're really dealing, and I'd already worked with victims of sexual harassment, sexual assault. So there's a lot of weight on your shoulders because you carry those stories with you.
You have to create space for those
Yeah.
people that you're working
Yeah.
with, right? And
Yeah.
you have to hold that, in your heart, on your shoulders, wherever,
Yeah. Yeah,
wherever
and
you.
the confidentiality, I can't go home and have a conversation with my spouse about what I just experienced,
Right.
another person. And there's a lot of vicarious trauma that, an advocate goes through. And I was thinking, like, can I do this? Do I have the drive to do that? And but the thing that changed my mind is when I got into coaching, I got into a taste of positive psychology, and even a little bit of the master resilience training I had in the army. I realized that there's a positive aspect to counseling and psychology, and so, but coaching focuses in on that positive side. If you're going that, yeah, you're on that negative side, maybe, on a scale of 1 to or -10 to +10, maybe on that negative side, you might need to go see a counselor, but a coach can still come in and help you with performance improvement in other areas of your life and still complement the counseling. And then you got coaching. And I've got several clients I work with now that have therapists, and we work with each other and try to complement what each one's doing. And then there's mentorship in the middle of all that. And I
Mhm.
thought coaching was the best part of me because it was all about performance improvement, looking at the whole person. And again, that goes back to that personal professional development, whether that's, working, with corporate executives, or middle managers, which is I do right now. And a lot of them are young parents, and they're, dealing with the challenges of, I'm a young parent with 2 young kids in the home. My wife's working, I'm working. We're both trying to figure out who's got the computer,
Mhm.
because we don't have 2 separate offices. We're working from home.
Yeah.
And they're just struggling with all these different things. And what relationships do they have outside the home today, after 2 years of COVID? And there's a lot of stuff going on, and I've helped people work through some of that stuff. So that's what's really been fascinating to me, and kind of why I went more towards the coaching side versus the counseling side. I dealt with enough trauma in my lifetime that I was like, I really do appreciate that, and I love the work, and I still support it, and I do some work on the side still. I
Mhm.
spent uh 2 years as an advocate, 2 years training advocates,
Mhm.
and then I do some volunteer work and some training, here on the side from time to time. So I still support the industry, and those causes. But to it is, those social services, even working with quarter point as a quarter point special advocate, working with young
Mhm.
kids and
Mhm.
adoption,
Mhm.
or adopted homes or foster homes, they go through a lot of trauma, and
Mhm.
it's just a lot to carry. And so for me, I knew that I had to create a certain amount of space for myself,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. You have to. The old adage, well, not the old adage, the thing, anytime you take a flight anywhere, they always tell you got to put the oxygen mask on yourself
Mhm.
first.
Yeah,
You can't take care of other people if you're falling apart, right?
yeah,
So
for
for sure.
sure.
Um, you mentioned, I want to circle back to
Yeah.
the fatherless child
Yeah,
part that resonates deeply with me because I grew up without a dad as well. But
yeah,
before we get there, you mentioned earlier that you never thought the Army was going to be what it was.
yeah.
What was it for you?
Yeah, so I thought, my intentions going in. So my grandfather was instrumental in my life. He was there from the day I was born until he left about 10 years ago. Um, and he was just an encouragement. He was that guy that I would look up to, and if I done something wrong, he would look at me and he didn't have to say a word. He'd just give me that look, and I'd be like, "Oh man, I just disappointed my grandfather. I'm an idiot."
Now you're in trouble.
And but he never whooped me. He never spanked me. Sometimes we go for a walk around the field, and have a conversation. But it was just the man was just powerful in his presence. So I'll put
Mhm.
it that way. I'd see him about once a week. And when I was about 12 or 14 years old, him and my grandmother began to encourage me to pursue the military. It's kind of a family business. He was in the Navy. One of my stepfathers was in the Navy. His father was in the Navy. I had family members in the Civil War, World War II. My great grandfather was in World War II. All the way back to American Revolutionary War. We could trace our roots back pretty far. So it was kind of like the family business.
Mhm.
And as I began to, as they began to encourage me, and I began to think about, okay, what opportunities do I have? Even as a young man, I was young man, not yet, but a young teenager. I began to think about that, and there was two factories. They were both shutting down, and all that was left was the prison to hold that community together. So when you think about a community of about 7,000 people, two factories shutting down, that's about 800 jobs. That's a lot in a town of 7,000 people. So if I wanted to continue working on a farm, making a minimum wage for the rest of my life, that was okay. And I love farming. I enjoyed it. I love the work. I love the environment. I love the atmosphere and the culture of it, the values that it brings. But it just wasn't gonna, put food on the table every single day. At least, in the desire, the aspect that I wanted, right? And so that's why I went in. And I also went in because I wanted to get out of the Midwest and I wanted to get out of that town. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, majority of my career I stayed in the Midwest. I ventured out as far as Kansas and all, between Kansas and Indiana. So I spent I was stationed in Kansas 3 times, Missouri twice, Indiana once, and I'd only been to New York, Egypt, and Virginia
Mhm.
out of all that. So probably about 20 out of the 26 years I spent in the Midwest. So I never got out. I never was more than 3 or 4 hours away from home. So
Right on. So a couple things there. One,
yeah.
I love your love of farming. I myself
Mhm.
spent a lot of time as when I was growing up at my aunt and uncle's. They had a 700-acre grass seed farm in the Willamette
Mhm.
Valley of Oregon, and so I grew up around combines and swathers and doing all that stuff. And yeah, like you said, that the culture, the environment,
Yeah.
the kind of
Mhm.
the lessons that a farm can teach are special. I think I love that. And I want to circle
Yeah.
back to again the idea of growing up fatherless and kind of stuff that you
Mhm.
learned from that and how does that come through in the coaching that you do today?
Yeah, I probably experienced most things that as would be considered a societal ill when it comes to fatherlessness. So fatherlessness has this theme, right? You know, most things I shouldn't say. Domestic abuse. Majority of people in prison or grew up in fatherless homes. Teen pregnancies, fatherless homes. Drug abuse, fatherless homes. Alcohol abuse. You name it. Anything that society says, that's a problem, generally has some kind of theme of fatherlessness to it. Suicide rates. And so I had gone through a period of time where I was involved in drugs and alcohol, even at an early age, like 12 years old.
Mm,
I had already been exposed to that. I had no father. So boys that were 3 or 4 years older than me were my idols, I shouldn't say idols, but mentors, and just the kids that would bring me into their fold, right? Where I felt a sense of belonging. Because, when you had a father, when you know, someone has betrayed your trust, they've broken your heart, and you have a hard time trusting others. I think, in Fatherless America in the Church, there's a guy from Kansas City who wrote that book. He said, he walked across the street and talked to a pastor had walked across the street and talked to a drug dealer. And he said, "What do you got that I don't? Like, why are all these kids hanging out with you and not here in the church?" And he said, "Because I'm here and you're not. I'm the one on the street corner. I'm the one that provides for them. I'm the one who gives them money. I'm the one who gives them opportunity, even though it was drugs. You know, I'm giving them something." And the guy was like, wow, because of that guy's presence in these boys' lives, and he was available to them, right?
Yeah.
And they saw him as a show of strength.
Almost, yeah. You
Because
almost get like maybe
yeah,
a sense of belonging, a sense of
yeah, yeah.
fraternal, fraternity
Yeah,
a little bit.
yeah, you're a part of that group, and so that's all a father's kid wants to be a part of. And so I went through a lot of that, and I came out on the back end of that, right? I was fortunate enough or lucky enough that I knew that if I was going to do anything with my life, I had to get clean. I had to join the military, and I needed to get out of that town, right? Or else nothing was going to change for me.
Mhm.
So I had enough presence of mind to do that. And as I began to track through the army, I ran into special people, other men in my life that kind of mentored me and helped me develop and grow in ways that I probably was behind on as I was coming through the ranks. And several interesting events that happened. But I didn't come to faith until I was probably about 32 years old, after I'd met my second wife. And or right before I met it was after I met her, but before we got married. And I really, like, kind of that time frame, that was right after my grandfather had passed away. I began to think about the purpose in life.
Mhm.
Why am I here? What am I doing? Because an event like that, a divorce, and then me reaching out to my mom and asking her, "Hey, what's going on here? Like, what's the story behind this fatherlessness stuff?" And she told me her story, and I was kind of shocked. That was the first time I'd actually ever heard her tell me the story why I grew up fatherless,
I'm
and I
curious. Would you share that
never
with us?
asked her. Yeah, I can share that with you. So basically, what happened was is she kind of grew up. She grew up in a middle class home for the most part. We lived in Peoria, Illinois. My grandfather had a really great job and he lost it. He worked at a distillery. He did really well. He came out of the Navy, had lots of cash in his pocket. The family just fell in hard times, lost his job, and they were in poverty. And so they went from an upper middle class family to poverty. And he moved into like a 3 or 4 bedroom home with his brother, who already had like 6 or 7 kids. He had 6 or 7 kids. They were just trying to survive. He was
Mhm.
driving 2 hours a day to St. Louis to work because he could only get a job at the Chrysler plant.
Mhm.
And so he was gone 6 days a week. And my mom kind of fell on hard times. She remembered, having all this and then nothing, right? And then
Yeah.
so she blamed her parents for it. And so she began to rebel. And after she graduated high school, she ended up at some party, and it was a drug and alcohol induced sexual assault. She doesn't remember what happened. It's what they call blacked out, passed out. And
Yeah.
she was taken advantage of at the time. And a few months later, she realized she was pregnant, lied to her parents about what happened. And and she told me, she's like, I told them I was scared. And so she lied to them about what happened. And they kind of disowned her for a while. And 9 months later, I was born. And then my
Wow.
grandfather decided that he was not going to continue to um uh you know I'm I'm his first grandson, right? And so that
Yeah.
kid needs someone. And so he forgave her, never knew what really happened, but he didn't care and never pressed it or pursued it. I was the first
Yeah.
person my mother had told in 33 years of what really happened.
Wow.
And it was just sort of like rocked my world for a moment, and I
Sure.
was I was like, wow. I said, I can't believe I went 32 years without knowing the story, and I
Yeah.
never asked. And that
Yeah.
was the thing. And so yeah, she said, and she was like, look, you saved my life. She goes, if it wasn't for you, I would have continued to be on the path that I was. And having a child, she goes, it got me smart and responsible real quick. And I wish that was fortunate for everybody, and that isn't always that case.
Yeah.
Uh, but that a lot of that leads to purpose and meaning, and knowing that story, knowing what happened, contributed to a lot of the reasons why I was involved with victims of sexual harassment, sexual assault, reasons why I'm supportive of Fathers in the Field, which is a ministry for fatherless boys growing up, and provides mentors for those boys. And there's just a lot of things that I do now, and a lot of that ties into coaching. So I've worked with a lot of the fatherless men, and helping them through those issues and challenges that they're going through. Some of the same stuff I experienced as an adult.
Sure.
Now that I'm on the other side of it, and I say I'm very fortunate, because it could have gone, the statistics were against me.
Yep.
And so I felt very, I felt like I was saved, and I was saved for a reason. And so I needed to do this. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. That's, I mean, it's difficult to have the wherewithal at a young age, and it's you're blessed to have your grandpa around to kind of
yeah,
maybe kick your ass a little bit and say maybe you ought to check out, maybe you ought to check out the military to get a little
yeah,
bit of discipline, right? And
yeah,
that kind of that discipline that a male presence as you're growing up would otherwise give you.
yeah.
Um,
What's crazy about that is he lost his father when he was 9 years old to
okay, so he
like some
maybe he
kind of
got that then, right? Like
it's a
he,
it's a generational thing, and you can
yeah,
continue to inherit it. And so it was like, hey, does it stop with me? And
yeah.
so I had to make that decision. So
Yeah, when my father found out that my mother was pregnant, they were not married. They had been
mhm,
dating for a while. But he had 3 kids with another gal, and he didn't want another one. So he basically
mhm,
told my mom, have an abortion or I'm out, and she didn't want to have an abortion. So
mhm,
that's the way that ended up for me. But like you, I didn't do the military route. That would have been
mhm.
real good for me. By the way. That's not what I did. It took me a little longer. I think I was an adult child until maybe 35 years
Mhm,
old, 34, 35 is when I really started to um, just kind of look at where I was and look at where some of my friends were. And I saw the gap, and I was just like,
mhm.
I need to start working on this a little bit.
Yeah.
And yeah, so anyways, neither here nor there. I want to circle back to you and your coaching.
Mhm.
Tell us more about who are your clients? Who do you work with?
Yeah. Yeah, generally, I work with first time managers, supervisors, VPs, directors within, the corporate world. I've worked with some Fortune 100 and 500 companies. It ranges from, even academic institutions, construction companies. It's all over the map really as far as industry is concerned. It's just that mid-careerist, right? It's right there, in that section. And it's usually folks have been in business anywhere from probably like 10 to 20 years. It's on the average. It's generally, I work with a lot, mostly men, but a lot of like-minded women as well as that. And we do a lot of different things like working on confidence, speaking up, understanding their own personalities and how it may clash or complement, the workforce. We work on a lot of things like emotional intelligence, and so there's a lot of skills that we work with throughout the coaching. It really just depends on what they're coming for. But usually it's that middle ground. Your first time managers or supervisors all the way through VP level. So
Okay. And it sounds like you're working with kind of maybe SMEs, small, medium enterprises.
yeah, all three. I mean, and like I said, I've worked with some like medical research companies, software as a system companies, work with IT directors, and some of them are startups and some of them are nonprofits. And I mean, it's all over the map. I mean, there's, like I said, there's some larger companies that have been around for 100 years. I work with also, so larger, more traditional corporate organizations. So it's all over the place.
How do you find your clients? How do you market yourself?
Yeah, so mostly they come through a referral process. And so and I also, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, communicating with folks, having those conversations, a lot of emails back and forth. Sometimes I reach out to a lot of people, and they come by way of that. So it is really kind of, hammering down that target audience, knowing who they are, and then, kind of filtering through And I have a team that kind of helps me out with that a lot too. I don't spend all day emailing folks asking, "Hey, you want to coach?" And sometimes they come through referrals. Those are the greater ones. I mean, people that I've worked with before, they either stay with me for an additional year or two, working on whatever they. I've actually got one lady right now. It's the third year I've worked with her.
Oh,
Every
wow.
year we have a 1 year agreement, and then every year she's like, "No, I want to do this again next year." So, and some folks come by way of referrals. Somebody, I was working with a company that they were merged or bought out by another company. And I was working with him as he was making that transition into this new company, and reestablishing their presence in Florida. And he recommended one of his employees come work with me, and me and him worked together for about 9 months. And he said, "Hey, I've got someone I want you to work with." And so
Mhm.
it happens like that sometimes.
Do you work typically like one-on-one with someone, or are you working with, for example, a leader or a manager and then their team below them as well?
No, mostly it's one-on-one. So I do get a little bit of manager feedback.
Yeah.
I usually keep our conversations confidential. I would never reveal anything, but the manager always sends me just a couple questions they get asked and say, "Hey, what do you think they should work on? What do you think they're great at? What do you think, would be most important for them to get out of the coaching conversation?" Things of that nature. And usually I just get a little bit of feedback in the very beginning. Um, and then I kind of reveal some of that information to the coaching client.
Mhm.
And we have a conversation about that, right? Because we do some assessments, and I say, "Okay, well, here's what the assessments show. This is what you said you want to work on. This is what the manager wants to work on." And so between the three, we kind of create a path forward.
Mhm. Yeah, nice. You said the magic word earlier. A lot of almost every coach that I've spoken with,
Mhm.
many of them certainly, have if when I ask them like what is the one big roadblock for you for your business, for growing your business, for
Mhm.
scaling, anything like that, it's always time. And the
Yeah.
word that you said is team.
Yeah.
You've got a team around you to
Yeah.
help you do things. Please talk about that a little bit. How did you build your team? Who are they? What did they do? This will be super helpful, I think, for people, for our viewers and listeners.
Yeah, I knew that I was taking on way more than I should have on my shoulders, and it was stealing my time away from everything else that I enjoyed and loved in life. And either I was going to work in the business 18 hours a day, or I was going to hold on a second.
Dang it, Alexa.
Yeah, Alexa got me. I thought I turned it on mute, but she got me.
I've had
But
that happen many times.
yeah, but yeah, I had too much on my shoulders. I was either going to work in the business 18 hours a day and steal time from everything else that I loved, or I was going to do the one thing that I thought I was good at, which was coaching.
Mhm.
Um, and I wanted to do more coaching. And so I had to decide what I was going to give up. And I realized that I was spending a lot of time on graphics, and just like pouring over picture after picture, and I was like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And so I went on Fiverr and actually found a guy. Now I got lucky the first time, right? I found a guy that I still have a relationship with 3 years later.
Mhm.
And he still works for me, and I give him a flat fee, and he works with me for the most month. He does most of the graphics and most of the video stuff that we do now, and he's getting better and better, so I'm investing in him. So as he gets better, it comes right back to me as well. And so we've developed this really good relationship. And then I tried to hire a couple more people. Those didn't go out so well. They both got fired at some point.
Always a
And
learning experience trying to figure that
yeah,
out.
yeah, and so I stopped going to Fiverr, and actually I went and interviewed a couple virtual assistant companies and had a few conversations with a few people and decided on one. Um First person that I worked with from that company ended up getting fired. and so and then the next two, I hired the next gal, and she actually she helps me with a lot of the social media aspect of it, right? And does a lot of calendaring, podcast, coordination, things of that nature.
Yep.
And she does a lot of that legwork, and then some of the conversations. So if you ever have a conversation on the back end, just ask if it's Kirby or not, and she'll tell you. Because I told her, I said, you got to be honest with people. Don't pretend to be me, because they're gonna know. Tell them it's you. So because she is part of the team and she is part of the personality of the business. So I make sure that my team knows that they can act and be who they want to be.
Mhm.
And don't try to imitate me. I don't want to do that. I want to have some integrity. And so, I got her, and then I have another young lady helps me write the content. So, all the podcasts that I do, a lot of other things, helps me write emails. That's all really time consuming. So if I'm spending, I probably have 20 clients. Some of them I meet with weekly.
Yeah.
Some of them I meet every 2 weeks. I don't have time for much else. So
Yeah.
between podcasting, recording, doing all that, directing the team, that's what's left.
Yeah.
And I'm still even thinking about hiring another person just to get, some more things done. So because I see it going, further.
Hmm.
But
Do you have, so for your team, as you're directing them, have you built out, like SOPs and process documents that they could follow step by step, or is it generally you teach them how to do something and then work with them to have them figure out a way for them to do it? How do you balance that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I started doing, actually one of the team members came up with an idea that we use Slack as far as a communication channel, so we can all know what each other's talking about. We meet monthly as a team, and so we do that part of it. But on another aspect of it, and because of Slack, one of the team members recommended that I use Manifestly. It's manifest.ly, I do believe it is, and it's like a process. I can assign different tasks to different team members. It embeds with Slack really well, or integrates, I shouldn't say embed, integrates really well. And so we're having conversations in these threads about what's going on, what needs to happen. And through that process, I was able to so I would, for each task, I would do a screen share. And
Hmm.
so I would record myself talking through a task that I was performing. I dropped the video on a Google Drive, linked it to Manifestly. So that way, if I ever lose one of those folks, all they have to do is go to the task list,
Yeah.
click on the link. They can watch your video, how it's done. And I told them, I said, if you improve the process, it's up to you, record a new video and put the new link in there. And
Yeah.
so that's how we're doing it. And that's it. It's learned by doing. There's some things that I've given them, and I'm like, hey, I don't know how to do this. You go figure it out.
That's always
So
nice. That's great
yeah.
when you've got a team that you can trust to solve, maybe not the most epic problems in your business, but like
Yeah.
stuff, right? Like you're going to be the expert at this. This is why I'm hiring you. I don't know
Yeah.
how to do this. You figure it out. If you can trust your team to do
Yeah.
that sometimes, that's
Mhm.
really valuable.
Yeah, and the thing I love about my team is that none of them knew how to operate the systems that I use. So I use Meet Edgar, I use ConvertKit. None of them had ever touched that stuff before.
Yeah.
None of them had ever used WordPress before. And I said, okay, I'll give you the basics. I know enough to be dangerous and break it. And so I'm going to teach you that. You figure out the rest. And if you have an idea, bring it, we'll figure it out together. So it's a pretty open conversation that we have most of the time, and nothing's off the table. So
Yeah. Nice. I love it. I want to circle back to your coaching and your clients again. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you do what you do?
yeah, I can tell you how I do. I mean, the idea, I think you said it in the intro, it's laser focus. So which is basically, you know we come to an agreement on what we're going to have the discussion about that day. And sometimes, folks will show up and they won't know what to talk about. So we'll have a conversation about that. But
You
that's probably
said
another talking point.
real quick. So you said you'll come to an agreement about what you guys will talk about that day.
Mhm,
When you start an engagement with a new client, do
mhm.
you set like a goal? Do you set goals that are more
Yeah.
longer term, like a 3-month goal or a 6 or a
Yeah.
12? goal. And
We
then
do. Yeah, we do. And, that's always been the beginning conversation. So usually the first conversation we have is just an onboarding conversation. And if we have time at the end after we've kind of gone through a bunch of stuff about confidentiality, what coaching is, what coaching's not, um, we'll discuss a little bit about why they came to coaching. And then in the second conversation, I usually have a conversation about, hey, here's your strength, your strengths assessment, this is what your manager said, this is what you want to work on. And then we kind of figure out, okay, what is it that we're going to work on moving forward? And so they usually set that goal then. And they've always got my permission, right? Say, hey, something's going to come up at some point in time. We're probably not going to work on this specific thing week after week, but you'll have something to do. You'll be working towards it. But hey, you got a briefing that's coming up and you need some help with that. And so, okay, we'll have a conversation about that briefing. And then the next time we'll get back on track. So those things begin to happen, but it's usually they're on track with the goal. It usually, and I remind them too, that if they're bringing up different things each week, it's up to me to kind of recenter them back. Hey, has things changed since we, talked a couple weeks ago? Because you're wanting to work on all these different things, but it's not the same thing that we agreed at the very beginning, in that second conversation. So that does come up from time to time. But generally they come up and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, or I'm having trouble with this, or I'm not sure what to talk about today. And so I'll kind of begin an exploratory process. And I'll be like, hey, what's on, there's one of the easy ones is the 7 coaching questions. What's on your mind? What else? What else? What else? And people get annoyed with you saying what else, but eventually you get to where you need to be at.
You got to dig deep.
That's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing we're going to work on. It's almost like asking why 5 times. Sure. You're just going to those different layers, and it usually flushes out at some point in time. But it's most of the time we try to keep it on track with the idea that we originally came up with, because I've had that problem before where you come into this coaching conversation and every week somebody brings up a different topic and it's like, okay, like how does all this, like when you're going to get to the end, you're going to not feel like you've accomplished anything because you haven't set any concrete goals
and you've bounced around too much.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that's okay if someone wants to do that, and that's, but they have to agree to that in the very beginning, week after week. I need coaching because I'm all over the place. Okay, well, let's figure out why you're all over the place.
Yeah.
Sometimes giving them what they want in the beginning leads to what they need to be doing later on. And so that I guess it's one of those, tricks that sometimes they would say coaches play. Give them what they want in the beginning, and then they'll discover what they really need to work on later on. So, and I can't really tell someone, right, what they need.
Sure.
So,
sure. Yeah. And I suspect there's probably a rather subtle differentiation between bouncing around on different topics. Like, I need help with this week. I need help with this week. And you're just bouncing all around, and bouncing around from different topics that are adjacent to your big goal for 6 months or 12 months, right?
Yeah.
Because to get to that big goal, you're going to have challenges in different areas of your life, maybe personal, maybe professional, and you're going to bounce around a little bit, but it's all going to be in pursuit, right, of this big goal, as opposed to just bouncing around with no plan.
Yeah, and I've worked with people on different things. So, one of the interesting things that I do, I think is interesting. I don't know if any other folks do this. I haven't really run across it. There's this idea of bibliotherapy a long time ago. And so I was like, well, why not biblio coaching? And I think I read it somewhere in a book. It was just like a short paragraph. And I was like, that's kind of interesting. So I like to use some of the tools that are out there, like emotional intelligence, strength finders, and if we're hitting on something with someone, even dispersonality profile system, if we're hitting on something, then it's like, let's leverage that. Let's use that assessment. Let's read that book. One of the ones I've been using lately is positive intelligence. It's about different saboteurs. And it's a lot, it's a lot like positive psychology, but also, emotional intelligence. And it's kind of like, I think when I listened to the author actually talk about it, I actually watched him talk about it a couple of weeks ago. He was doing a webinar. He said, your saboteurs are kind of like your Darth Vaders. And so because we couldn't use Darth Vader because that's copyrighted. So he's like, so we had to call them saboteurs instead. But it's a great book. So I've worked with a couple guys through that process. Even Design Your Life, right? And I had a couple guys that were getting ready to retire. They wanted to do some succession planning, and after we worked through succession planning, and they had put things in motion. They're like, okay, what am I going to work on now? And I was like, well, there's this thing called Design Your Life, and I made a suggestion, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. I've probably spent the last 30 or 40 years focused on work, and I haven't focused on relationships or play, and I don't even know if I know how to play anymore. And so I've worked with veterans transitioning out of the military with that Design Your Life.
Is that a specific book, Kirby?
Yeah, it's by two Stanford professors.
Okay.
It's called Designing Your Life, and there's another one called Designing Your Work. But I use the workbook with coaching clients. Here it is. But this is another great one, and so those are really good resources. I got another young lady whose son left, for college, going through a transition period, and so we've talked about this. She's working through that, and we're also working on daily reflections and her getting out. Her son is not her focus anymore because her son's in college now, and he's off on the other side of the US, and so they're far away from each other, and it's not like they can go visit each other. So she's working on designing her life, and part of that process is that she's getting involved in different communities. She's setting up lunches to go and have lunch with different ladies that she enjoys their company, but she's also doing a lot of reflection. So we use Ryan Holiday's The Daily Stoic to be reflective. I got another guy that's doing that. So I just take the resources that are already out there, and we just leverage them, to have some of these conversations.
Have you ever checked out Design the Life You Love?
I don't. It's not ringing a bell. So
that's a fun one. You might just buy a copy and just take a peek through it. It's called Design the Life You Love. By the way, for our listeners and viewers, we'll get all of these books. We'll add to the show notes. So you guys can check these out. But Design the Life You Love is like an interactive workbook. So you're supposed to write in it and draw in it, and it runs through kind of exercises and stuff. It's not really cool to read through, but it's kind of a fun alternative for perhaps for people who are highly creative, maybe a little more visually creative. It's a fun one.
I love using books as a part of the coaching process. So I think it gives them the opportunity to read it. Plus there's activities, and that's the ones I've been mentioning. There's actually activities. There's things you must do. So that becomes the homework. And so it provides a structure. It makes it easy, and it just depends on, that initial couple conversations we have. And then I might, reference this. I actually just referenced emotional intelligence to one of the ladies I was working with yesterday. And we'd already been working together for 3 months about putting herself out there. And what we realized is that her self-awareness and self-management probably was a little bit lower. So she's going to go take the assessment. We're going to validate that. So, and that was just me suspecting it. And so she's like, yeah, I want to go take the assessment. So.
Nice. Kirby, I want to be respectful of your time, but I want to ask one more question at least before we wrap up, if that's all right.
Yeah, it's cool.
You mentioned one of your areas of expertise, or at least areas of interest, is recovering from traumas and injuries.
Yeah.
How does that play into this, this leadership coaching with business professionals? Where does that come into play?
Yeah, I think, part of that is I, when I went to school, I spent a lot of time researching narrative therapy, and, which brings up, I hate to drop like my entire library on you, but, there's a book called Narrative Coaching. And it is just retelling the stories of our life that makes us the superhero out of that story. We have all, and Jane McGonigal is really good at this too, because she suffered from a severe depression. And she treated life kind of like a video game. And so I take a lot of those ideas and concepts of those people who've kind of helped battle through some of their own traumas, whenever even they didn't feel like they could get help, nothing was working, and they had to rely on their own devices to kind of push themselves and kind of rewire their brain, retell the stories. And so it's just taking the idea of adversity, right? And finding the strength in yourself and how you overcame that adversity, and leveraging that, right, to for growth.
Mhm.
and having an understanding, processing some of the traumas and thoughts and feelings that you're going through it. And I'm very careful about staying away from therapy and counseling, but it, the challenge with all this is setting up healthy goals moving forward, and I think that's where coaching comes in that process. So I tell folks to spend a lot of time in reflection about this stuff, journaling and things of that nature, and I think that helps them through that, and it kind of pulls out those lessons and storylines and other things that they can begin to talk about in the future. And that's kind of how I did it.
Mhm.
And so we're just replicating that same process that I learned to journal.
Yeah.
What is this, this conversation I'm having in this journal? What does this mean? What's the lesson and what's the story? And just to follow this piece, that came through a lot of journaling and being able to talk about that and have conversations,
Yep.
stand up in front of people and be able to tell them that story. It can be extremely challenging.
Yep.
And I've seen other people with traumas, and when they can retell their story, it's almost healing. So working with victims of sexual harassment and sexual assault, it's always an inch at a time, a step by step.
Yeah.
It's based off their own comfort zone. And some of the ones that that are out there, that have done extremely well since their incident, are ones that are retelling their story. They're sharing it with other people, and it almost makes them stronger every single time they tell it. And I think it's just a healing. It's a very healing and healthy process to go through. Um, so that's where I would say, mostly for me, it's the trauma of being fatherless and having these experiences, having worked in, studied and worked and with victims that were sexual assault, human trafficking, fatherless boys, and fatherless men, and hearing all this. We all have traumas. We just got to create that space for people to kind of have that conversation.
Absolutely. Are you familiar with a company by the name of BioCybernaut?
But no, I am not.
They do. So you mentioned, you mentioned a couple things. You mentioned you were kind of doing some studying on neurotherapy,
Yeah.
and that you have to be careful, right, not to use
Yeah.
those words like therapy
Right.
or things like
Right.
that. So BioCybernaut, transparently, they are a client
Mhm.
of ours, but they do neurofeedback training. Legally, they're not allowed to call it neurotherapy.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Neurofeedback training. There's a forgiveness protocol in there, and you're attached to an EEG,
Mhm.
electroencephalograph, and your brain waves come back to you in the form of audio feedback.
Okay.
And as you're going through in your mind and going through a forgiveness protocol, the big thing that they specialize in essentially is this trauma therapy,
Mhm.
helping
Mhm.
repair
Yeah.
relationships, helping people recover from sexual assault and other kinds of
Mhm.
emotional trauma
Yeah.
in childhood and stuff like that. There, I've been for the Alpha One training, and it was a huge it's a huge help for me. It definitely like got me through some garbage from my childhood, and
Yeah.
work through that stuff. So might be something interesting for you to check out or look into. It's all yeah.
Yeah, definitely I will check it out. And that's for me. I mean, it did the same, this narrative, understanding the narrative therapy, right? And telling those stories and sharing them
Yep.
helped me find the purpose of and leverage it and not say, oh, I'm a victim, right? And I'm going to have this victim mentality. It allowed me to take what had happened and make that purposeful and use that as kind of stepping out on a diving board and jumping out back out in the sea, and using it as an opportunity for growth. So I think probably should spend a lot more time in that area and understanding that and discovering it. And that's where a lot of positive psychology is just you know trying to put a positive aspect on some of the things that we've gone through. Yes, they're tragic and we need to take the time to heal and process those and things like that, but at some point you have to get out of that status, right? Because you can remain hopeless and then you'll be helpless. And so that and that's a challenge, and I know what that feels like at times, right? And so
Yeah.
I was very fortunate, because I didn't think there was anything out there for me. And I was like, I was at that point. That's when I began that process of discovery. I was like, I had to ask myself that question: is this all life has to offer, and what is the point of this if this is how bad it's going to be all the time?
And
And
yeah, you go through a traumatic experience, and
mhm,
that is going to mean, something different for everybody that goes through
yeah,
that. It's a very personal experience,
yeah,
right? And also, it's made you who you are. You've
mhm,
taken something away from that. You've learned from it. You're more resilient because of it.
mhm,
It's not, yeah, and that's kind of the way that I see that spin on the
yeah,
positive psychology. It's the
yeah,
idea is not to deny the bad,
yeah, right,
but to look for the lesson within, right?
yeah, for sure.
So yeah, cool. Kirby, is there anything that you would like to talk about that we haven't touched upon before we wrap up?
No, I don't think I got anything else to offer. I mean, it's been a great conversation. I really do appreciate it, Michael. This has been awesome. So
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate you making the time for it. Where can our listeners and viewers connect with you online?
yeah, that's great. One or two places. I don't want to give you too many because then you'll be all over the place. But KirbyIngles.com is really simple to go to. If you want to go on there, there's a place where you can sign up to get emails from us and things of that nature, or just read the blog or what we're producing. And then, I'm always on LinkedIn. So that's the main social media. I ignore most of the rest of them, but if you want to be active and involved, I'm generally on LinkedIn and on there almost every single day. And I'll respond to any message that you send me. So
Awesome. And Kirby, you're also the host of the True Success podcast. You want
yes,
to
sir.
drop a little pitch for that real quick,
Thank
please,
you.
if you would.
Appreciate that.
You
Yeah,
bet.
true success. It's it's really the idea about purpose to impact. It's taking our purpose in life and creating a resounding impact, whether that be future generations or, within our communities that we serve. And that's, hopefully through that coaching process, right? We begin to see that, we serve others as much as we would like to serve ourselves. So it should be outward focus, not inward focus. And through that inward focus we can look out and begin to serve others. So
Awesome. Love it, Kirby. Thank you so much again for taking the time to be here. We appreciate it.
thank you. Appreciate it, Michael.
And thank you to our viewers and listeners. We'll catch you guys next time. Cheers. Oh, how do I stop